What's up, guys? Super pumped about this. First ever Ask MD Live episode 1. Gonna be going over some questions that I have from my email list and hopefully chew on them with you guys, talk to you guys about them. You never know if your question is gonna get answered. I just announced this about 2 weeks ago, where on my motorcyclemd.com website you can actually go in there under the Ask MD drop down and there will be a tab that says like YouTube Live Q&A. Super easy thing to just check out and give me some information. I've got a couple that actually went through that process. The other ones I just kind of pulled up from the archive. And so I don't really know all the information, but I'm doing the best I can. What's going on, Matty D? Thanks for hanging out and joining us on this adventure. I'm super pumped about it. Every Monday. It may be earlier than 8:30. I was ready to go at like 7:30, but probably around 8 o'clock might be a safe bet. A little bit after dinner, and we can dive into it. But as you can see, I am sunburnt on my nose and my face. That's what happens when you wear a quarter face helmet for 2 hours riding in the sun from the DGR ride, which was amazing. It was an awesome experience. I actually got to lead the ride. I led 50 people on an old, rusted out CL450. It was awesome. I also led it with Charles Glover, who is a great friend of mine. So, thoughts on an 84 Magna. Just bought my first bike. Thank you guys for the questions now. I'm going to open the floor up a little bit after this. Probably, I don't want to kill too much of your time. I have about 4 or 5 people or questions that I want to get to. After that, I'll open the floor for your questions, so ask them then. I'm gonna keep my ADD mind or ADHD mind focused on the questions, and then after that, I'll open the floor for you guys. So, starting with number 1, episode 1, Ask MD. This is the first one I got. His name is from Matty D. He is in Frederick, Maryland. He's got a 1985 Honda CB450 SC. The only mod he really has is a stock uni air filter. Alright, he said, purchased the bike. Guy said it ran before he changed the battery. I noticed that the terminals were reversed and it had blown fuses, that's crazy. Got a battery, replaced the fuses, started right up. Bike seems to have a pilot circuit issue. Bike will sputter and idle with a little throttle rotation. So as soon as he gives it throttle, it seems to just kind of die out or sputter. It does cough fuel into the airbox, can blip the throttle a little, and it gets through it and operates fine in the higher RPM. So when he's giving it more air, it's operating fine is what it sounds like to me. More air, more fuel intake. Carbs have been cleaned 4 times now. Rebuild kits, new pilots, also has the same problem. Replace unadjustable floats, cam chain adjustment, valve clearance, synced carbs, new plugs, compression to spec and spot on, almost dead even throughout the 2 cylinders. I sprayed about half a can of carb cleaner around the carb and intakes to check for vacuum leaks. So that is really important for him to do. I'm glad he wasted that can to try to figure that out. No change in the RPM with that type of diagnostic tool. Let's see. Issue is with the same OEM filter, so even if he uses the original filter, it has the same problem. I've taken the fuel mixture screws about to at least the last thread. So he has the fuel mixture screws almost all the way out to where they're about to fall out, is what it sounds like. It's running a hair better. Gets through the bad spot in the same throttle a little bit easier with that adjustment. I've ordered the next 2 size pilot jets, I guess bigger. Does it seem like I'm on the right path after increasing the pilot size? If it doesn't work I'm out of ideas. Not sure what region the bike lived in. Could have been in the West Virginia mountains. If not, can any motorcycle require larger pilots over the years? Thanks for the question, Matt. It sounds like you have a lean issue on the pilot screw. You saying that it responds better, obviously, with more air intake when you give it throttle, opening the plates up, and you're allowing that airflow to increase. That's telling you that, okay, well, it's okay at the higher RPM, but the lower RPM when there's throttle plates are closed or the CV piston is not drawing as much vacuum through the bore of the carb, and your fuel mixture screws are all the way out, meaning you're trying to give it as much fuel as possible. It sounds like you have a lean issue. Now, I don't know the way you're cleaning the carb, okay? I know that you said you cleaned it 4 times. I've I've no disrespect to you. I've heard a lot of people say that I've cleaned the carbs 100 times, nothing's better, but the way they're cleaning it is actually wrong. What I would be more concerned with, even though you replace the pilot jets, I would be more concerned with the tunnels that attract that idle circuit. So just because the jet's clean, you have a fresh jet and you made a shot some carb cleaner through that port that the jet sits in, does not mean all the tunnels are clean, because you have multiple tunnels leading into that idle circuit. The slow mixture, the pilot, there may be a jet in there that's not removable. It's almost works. It helps the carb out. It helps the choke system out as well as idle. There's also transfer ports. As soon as you lift that front butterfly up on the carb, you'll notice there's some small holes down there. Those are transfers for that instant throttle response. So if those tunnels are not clean, you can have the same issue. I don't care how many idle jets you put in. Does a bike require bigger idle jets over the years? No, it shouldn't. Unless you have dramatic wear or deterioration inside of the jet or inside of the carb body, I would never suspect a carb to need bigger jets as it gets older or longer throughout the years. So unfortunately, it sounds like the carb is still not clean. The tunnels inside of it are not clean. You can try going to a bigger pilot jet, but if the tunnels are still dirty, that won't matter. It won't matter, because there's still some kind of restrictive flow in that idle circuit. So, bullet point, you're still lean on that idle mixture. Alright, you should not have that fuel mixture all the way out. It should be 2.5 to maybe 3 turns out max to get a good kind of adjustability throughout that idle circuit. So you can try a bigger idle if you want. I wouldn't get your hopes up. It sounds like you either need to soak that carb in some kind of hot solution, send it to a professional, or just be really, really thorough about all of those tunnels. The best way to clean the tunnels out would be to using a solution to soak the carb in to kind of break up that mixture. There's a lot of online stuff. You can boil some water with some pine salt. Don't boil it, but get it kind of hot. Let it soak in there for a while. And once you do that, compressed air can be your best friend. I have a tank that runs 100 psi. I know a lot of people don't have that, but compressed air with that kind of pressure to shoot through the carb is really helpful. I actually stay away from carb cleaner sprays. I actually use usually like a brake contact cleaner. Carb cleaners can leave a film behind that I'm not really too keen on. But then spraying each of those tunnels and say, okay, there's obviously a tunnel here in the front of this carb. I'm going to spray it here. It should leave somewhere, okay? And doing that with everything that you can possibly do with compressed air or that contact spray will ensure that something's not blocked. Even blowing through them with your mouth. That's how I would just to go through. Even after I use a $5,000 ultrasonic tank to clean carbs, I go through the same method every time. Contact cleaner, compressed air. Make sure that every tunnel is clean, because I do not want to go back in there 3 or 4 times again. So, thank you, Matt. Again, if you guys are just tuning in, save your questions till the end. I'm going to open the floor for a couple of quick questions as I go through at least 3 or 4 of these questions that I have here. If you're fresh on this thing, you can actually go to the motorcyclemd.com. There's a drop down on the Ask MD, and it will give you a questionnaire that is super, super helpful. So, next thing, let's see what we got. We got Jeremiah from Cleveland, Ohio. He has a 1976 CB750. Awesome bike. Can you turn the air mixture screws on the motorcycle? His has the air mixture as opposed to that fuel mixture that we just talked about. Air mixture screw on the motorcycle that is running to see to see the impact that it has on the idle. That way you can adjust it by sound. I have an old style carb before the CV carb, so as far as I know, they do not have fuel mixture screws, only for air mixtures, and 1 idle screw. Tips and tricks on getting the idle right on those carbs. Yes, I would definitely say to adjust them when the bike's running. That's the only way you can really tell if you're making a difference. So adjust them when the bike's warmed up. Okay, and what I would do, air mixtures are a little bit more temperamental than fuel. Fuel mixtures are a lot more forgiving with how it responds. Air mixtures are usually a pretty abrupt change in how that thing is operating. Obviously the 750 is a loud running motor. You got primary chains and all kinds. You got 4 carbs, 4 cylinders. it's kind of noisy and it's kind of hard to hear what's going on, but you can still do it. And the way you can do it, and this is actually a little side tip I'm gonna get into. Air mixtures don't have the same kind of rock out as the pilot screws do on a fuel mixture. So fuel mixtures can be like 2.5 to 3. Air mixtures can be like a quarter to a full to maybe a full and a half turn out from their initial setting. So what I would do is for each carb, I would get the bike nice and warmed up, have a fan blowing on the bike, obviously, so it's getting cooled down. And I would start with the left bank or the right bank, and then just turn it all the way in until you hear that one cylinder start to kind of choke up, saying that I don't really like that mixture you're giving me. There's not enough air. I'm getting way too much fuel, vice versa. Same thing you can do on a fuel mixture. So turn it all the way in, and once you got that change, now you know what to go off of. Okay, so if the tunnel is clean for the air mixture screw, carbs are clean, it will make a change. If there's no change at all, then you have something going on. It's not affecting the mixture at all. It's because there's something blocking that whole tunnel system. This is not doing anything out or in. That can also result when you put jet kits in bikes. If it's too rich or it's too fuel, like for instance on my CL450, I can turn the fuel screw all the way in, and that's only when I start getting a difference. Tell me it's too rich. It's a fuel mixture screw, and I'm cutting fuel all the way off, and now it's saying, oh, I want to idle up a little bit better. Anyways, I would turn each one in and then start backing it out, or just do one at a time, I'm sorry. So screw it in, one full turn, or all the way in, and then back it out. Once you hear that idle start to, or that one cylinder fault, go a half turn out. And then with air screws, I would do very, very small increments until you hear it at its highest or most even or smooth running sound is what you're looking for. Ideally, I think it's like a turn and a half max, maybe a little bit more depending on what you got going on, but that's what I would do. Each one, do the same exact thing. Turn it all the way in until you hear that difference, and then back it out. Very, very, very small fourth turns all the way in. Don't go half turn, half turn, half turn. Make small increments until you got all of them idling at its highest potential, saying that I love this mixture, perfect air and fuel, and then you can dial your idle screw down or up. Probably down is ideal, but that's what I would do, and definitely do it when the bike is running. So thank you for that question, Jeremiah. It's super helpful when you guys give me your name and where you're from, so I can see how far this is reaching out. So thank you. Next one is, this one was not entered in from the questionnaire, so I have little information about the guy, but it looks like it's from Pirate X40. He has a 1995 Honda Shadow 1100 Ace, clutch master cylinder. He actually just emailed me back when I sent stuff out to people saying, hey, you're about to be on live. So it looks like he's on the right track. But what his question was, clutch master cylinder and slave cylinder. I cleaned out the master cylinder up top where the clutch lever is and bled the line. It will work fine. Took it for a couple of times around, block start. Took it for a couple of times around the block, starts acting up. When I downshift and let the clutch out, clutch all the way out, then it takes a second for the clutch to kind of kick in. I downshift and let the clutch all the way out, then it takes a second to engage. I'll bleed it out the line and starts all over again. Do I need to take the slave apart, slave cylinder, and clean out the piston? Absolutely. It sounds like he emailed me back and said, hey, I got some new parts for the slave cylinder. So I think you're already on the right track, so I won't dive into that. I actually gave him a link to my clutch master slave cylinder rebuild video, which is pretty much the same for all the Hondas. Definitely rebuild the slave cylinder. If it's that old, it's got a problem. They usually leak right there at that slave, and then you got to rebuild the piston. Sometimes it's just easier just to slap a new one in, but you can rebuild them for a lot cheaper. There's a main seal, like a cup seal that keeps fluid in, and that leaks brake fluid, contaminating everything, dries into a hard, crusty cake, and then it's time to clean it out. So you're on the right track. All right, so next one from John. He's got a 72 CB350K4. Really enjoy your videos. Thanks, man. I'm a complete novice dealing with old bikes. Can you suggest how to clean and shine a bit the casings and covers? More concerned with the cleaning. Both sides are heavily stained and or corroded, and right side shows many boot scuffs from starting efforts. Thanks. So I don't want to go really far into this, but on mine was the same way. It had a lot of age and patina on it. You can shine those things up to be pretty much mirror-like, and what it takes is time and hand power, and you're gonna probably lose your fingertips. But you can start off with some medium grade sandpaper and just start sanding it. You can go in swirls, side marks, up and down, whatever you want to do, and then drop to a finer until you're almost using wet, dry sandpaper. That works great. Then after that, you can use some kind of metal polish and steel wool. There's a kind, it's number 4 zeros, so a hashtag number, and then 4 zeros, steel wool. It's almost like wood sanding, steel wool. Very fine, the finest you can buy, and then buff it out, man. Just keep rubbing on it, and that will bring it to like a really kind of my favorite, which is like the really cool patinaed looking motor, but it's smooth as a baby's bottom, and it's super clean, and it looks cool. Or you can spend the time with a buffing wheel after all that's done with some polishing compound, and just go to work until you can see your beautiful face in the side of the motor. So that's what I would do. Steel wool will be your best friend on a lot of metals. Chrome, start very light, and make sure that it's not scratching any kind of surface, or if you want it to scratch the surface, that's where I would go. So, great question. The next one, I don't know, I do know. Okay, his name is Dennis. He's got a 1985 Honda CB450 SC. So, I don't think I just answered this one. No, I didn't. Okay, so sputtering and stalling off idle. Myself, 2 others have been through the carb. Wait, this was the same one. I'm sorry. I totally copied and pasted the same exact thing. Impression test really helped. So, okay, we already talked about that one. That was in the first one. So next one's from Joey. He's got a 2007 Honda Shadow 750. Okay, I think we have like 4 of those in the shop right now. I installed a Karaoke hypercharger. The bike starts and idles fine, but doesn't have any power under any kind of load. When he really gags it, it doesn't really seem to respond. The bike will only get up to 50 miles per hour. There could be a couple of things going on. So I believe the hypercharger, they operate off like a butterfly in the front. I could be wrong, but it's a vacuum operated butterfly, and it kind of shuts, flutters, and opens as what's needed for the carb. So if that's not working at all and it's just straight shut, that could be a problem. If it's not that style and it's just wide open, it's probably because you have some jetting problems. I would simply don't buy a jet kit, don't buy a Dynajet kit. I don't really like those that much. I would start really simple first. With the 50 mile, not going to go over 50 miles per hour. Okay, 2 things. All right, 2 things. I would check out the videos that I have on shimming the main jet needle. That's a very helpful trick to richen up the mixture overall, idle, mid-range, and high RPM. It's a great technique. It's not mine. I borrowed it, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. It's been done for many years. And then I would back the mixture screw out for that carb about probably a full turnout. That's what I would do to see how it responds from there. It not going over 50 miles per hour could be an actual problem inside the carb. There's a diaphragm that functions up and down. It's a rubber diaphragm. If that is shot, probably not, because it's an 07. But if that has any holes or pinholes in it, that will actually only operate as much as it can, and then it'll just stop. I think that bike has a fuel pump. If the fuel pump is, if the bike sat for a long period of time before you bought it, or so on and so forth, the fuel pump can actually lose its ability to pump volume at the rate that it needs at that RPM. What I mean is, you have a brand new fuel pump. It pumps just what it needs at high RPM when it really needs it the most, when it's pumping a lot of fuel. As the fuel pump is used and as it sits for any type of period of time, corrosion builds up, whatever the case may be, it loses its ability to pump however much it needs, that volume of fuel going to the carbs, as it ages. And that's what happens to fuel pumps. It also affects them when you run the bike dry, straight out of fuel, if the fuel pump is no, because the gas actually helps cool the fuel pump. So if there's no gas in the fuel pump and you're trying to start the bike over and over again, it can actually burn itself up, believe it or not. Not to catch fire, but it's just wear that is on a heat level that's not acceptable with fuel pumps. But the fuel pump could also be a problem. If it's not pumping that volume, there's a trick that you can do. If you have a service manual, it tells you to have a fully charged battery, jump the relay for the fuel pump to make it just pump constantly. And they say check that in about 5 seconds. So you turn the key, or 10 seconds, turn the key on, it's gonna pump, 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 and it should be a certain amount of volume within that time period. That's how you would check the fuel pump. I would suggest a manual for you. And at that 50 mile per hour range, a good way that you can also check it is, I imagine obviously it's carbureted. I would check to see if when you are at that speed, 50 mile per hour, apply the choke very, very slowly. So when you feel it start to cut out, start to apply that choke. That's gonna richen the mixture up, and it's gonna tell you two things. Either one, I enjoy that fuel you're giving me, so I'm gonna pick up and take off. Okay, that would tell you that you have a lean problem at that rate. If it falls on its face, it tells you that it's way too rich. And it also tells you that it's a fuel problem. It's not a spark problem, it's not a compression problem, it's not a valve train problem, it's a fuel delivery issue, either not enough or too much. That's if it's, there's so many Honda Shadows, I believe the 07 is carbureted. I'm pretty sure it is. But the chokes, it's a tool that's already on your bike, and you can use it to diagnose many, many problems when it comes to fuel and air. So apply the choke, maybe full on or just halfway at that 50 mile per hour range when it's dying off. See how it responds, and that will help you kind of narrow down what you need to do. So there's a bunch of information. That's a loaded question, but we'll on to the next. If you guys can, save your questions till the end when I open the floor up for you guys, and that way I can really dive in. So, last one. This is from Joey. He's got a 2002 Honda Shadow Spirit 750 DC. I have a problem with knowing when I need to adjust my chain and how to know when to adjust it by looking at the chain. For example, how do you properly measure the chain's slackness to know when to adjust it? And help would be appreciated. Thank you, Cody. So I always tell people to check the chain around 500 miles or every 2 fuel fill-ups. It's super simple. Just reach down and grab the chain. 2 things you're looking for. One would be that your hand actually has oil on it. If you have a dry chain, like the one off my CL450, obviously you don't want your chain to look like this, very, very rusted, but all I'm getting is rust particles and dust. Alright, you want it to be wet almost with grease. Whatever grease you use, some is a lot thicker and sticks to it a lot better, but you want it to have some kind of lubrication. The thing with checking the chain without it being on the bench, it requires a little bit of work. So depending on the life of the chain, how often it was lubed, how often it was adjusted, a very important thing is to realize that your chain will probably have some sort of tight spot in it. Tight spot meaning that as your chain goes around, so you have a gear in the front of the transmission and then to the rear wheel. So as that chain goes around, usually there may develop a tight spot. Again, I don't know how many miles you got, age of the bike, if it was adjusted right, how old the chain is, so on and so forth. But just generally, as the chain goes around, you may have a loose spot in the chain and then a tighter spot as it travels. So your goal is to reach your hand down safely and just keep lifting up on the chain until as you roll the bike, maybe just roll it, check it, roll it, kind of keep in your mind how loose the loosest section was until you find that tighter spot. Let's say there is no tight spot. That's great. What you're looking for is about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. All right. So the best way, the easiest way would be to just use your thumb. Okay. Typically, if you measure your thumb out from the top of the thumb to the knuckle, somewhere around there is about 1 inch. All right. So from its lying position, okay, on a side stand, you should be able to push that chain up. Like let's say it's right here. I'm gonna try to do this. So let's say this is where the chain's lying. On the bottom, you're checking it midway. So from rear tire to the front sprocket, in that section that you can actually get a hold of. But you're just gonna take the chain and just push it up. And so from this top link, I'm gonna see how far that top link travels until it's, I believe, out of specification, which would be about 1 inch to 1/4 inch and a half is safe. 1.5 inches might be a little bit much it's a little bit on the loose side. But you would do that on the tight spot if you have one, because if you find a super sloppy loose spot on your chain, but then you have a drastic tight spot, you're gonna say, oh, I need a chain adjustment because that spot is way too loose. Well, as soon as you tighten that loose spot to adjust for that proper play, that tight spot is now even tighter. So as it goes around the front sprocket, it's gonna tighten and bind and wear that sprocket slap out. Or break the chain, take your leg off, break the engine case. It's a very crucial step. Chain sprockets are no joke. So 1.25 inch is a great free play. You don't want it slapping against the bottom of the swing arm, obviously, but if it is, double check to make sure that there's not a tighter spot in the chain. If there is, I would suggest replacing the chain and possibly sprockets. On the sprockets, you're looking for something pretty simple. So here's a sprocket off my CL450. As you can see, it kind of turned into shark teeth. Some of them are straight, but a lot of them have this nice little curve kind of going that way to it, and that's just from the age of the chain. So your sprocket should not have shark teeth, very, very sharp points. They should also not be curving in one direction. If they are, it's time to replace the set. Chain and sprocket. Chain and sprockets are like a relationship. Okay, they mate together, they learn together, and they figure out what works best until they're worn out. That's actually a bad example of a relationship, but you get what I'm saying. The chain will wear to the sprockets will wear to the chain, vice versa. So if you just go, oh, I want to put a new chain on it, and the sprockets are worn out, you're going to wear that $120 chain that you just put on slap out. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Check it every 400, 500 miles. If you need a chain adjustment, either take it to a shop that you trust, or it's time to start buying some tools, like a way to get the rear end up off the bike. So that is it. That's about 5 questions. Again, if you guys want to input a question to be answered here on live, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor now. But go to the motorcyclemd.com. There's an Ask MD drop down for a YouTube little page. Hit that, and there'll be a list that I want you to fill out. Give me some information about the bike, give me information about you, and then you never know when it's going to show up on here. So, Caleb, working on a CB350F that had wheels in the same shape as your 450. Are you going to be I missed it. I'm a bad reader. Shoot that one to me again. Shoot that question to me again. I'll try to read it faster. This one does not allow me to look at the comments before. I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. So, any questions now? We'll take it. We've already choked up 27 minutes. Holy, wow. 10 more minutes, and then that will be it. No, I missed my question. Well, I guess I'm watching this again. Sorry, Jeremiah. So yeah, any question that you guys have on your bike, I'll be happy to hopefully give some advice. I'm gonna try to do this again every Monday. Canadian Restore says I have a 1984 Honda VT500, starts on 1/4 choke. I don't know how cold it is where you are, but starting a bike on choke is not abnormal. That's why it's there to use. But if it only runs off choke halfway, dang it, I would say that you have a lean issue. If you have to run the bike on choke and it's not responding the way you want it to, then choke richens the mixture. Okay, so the bike responds positively with choke even when it's nice and hot. The carb needs to be cleaned out properly, and you have a lean problem. What he said, but while it's running, it needs choke too. Yeah, that's because you have a dirty carb. Your carb is clogged, and when you use the choke, it's richening the mixture, allowing it to run better. Okay. How to protect pitted chrome. I've heard of people using Marvel Mystery Oil and rubbing it in, as well as any kind of wax, whatever that wax is to polish cars with. You can use that to kind of seal it. 84 VF500 common problems. Slave cylinders going bad. That's definitely one of the bigger things. Amazing live corrosion from the middle of the brake rotor. How to get corrosion off the middle of the brake rotor? He's watching from Japan. That's pretty awesome. Corrosion from the brake rotor in the middle of it. They make old sanding like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a bore honer. They make those for rotors, but I would use some very, very light sandpaper and just kind of rough it up. And if it's rusted and the brake pad's being used on it, then it should probably come off. I wouldn't use like a really industrial wire wheel or anything like that. Just something very soft. And I'm not sure where the rust is on the brake rotor. I don't know if it's like heavy pitted corrosion rust. Then I would replace it, because it's your life depending on the brakes. I want it to be working as good as possible. So that's that. Jeremiah, can you run a bike with just baffles on and no exhaust pipe? Absolutely. When we did CBR 300 crankshaft recalls, I mean, that's a serious recall. And before, obviously, you take the motor all the way apart, all the way back together, I would run it with the exhaust full off. I mean, open, nothing on the headers, bolts at all, just wide open. Not wide open as far as throttle goes, but running it like that, just to make sure everything's going right. It's not going to damage anything for long-term purposes. I wouldn't run it daily and often, but you can totally start the bike without the exhaust on. Wear earplugs because it sounds like a freaking NASCAR. Shadow 700 front brake does not work when it is cold out. Heat is definitely a byproduct of the energy being used in your front brake. So on like brake rotor, on like brake drums, they actually work crazy when it's cold because a little bit of rust builds up. But I would look at the rotor, make sure it's not purple or blue or overheated, and if you're using Honda brake pads, then I would check to make sure that they're not glazed. If you're not using Honda brake pads, like some aftermarket Amazon, eBay special, I would go to Honda brake pads. Honestly, I mean, Honda's brake pad is set at a much higher standard than a lot of these aftermarket companies because they're a huge company. So you can rely on Honda brake pads a lot more than any kind of other aftermarket. If you're forced to get aftermarket, then that's just the way it is. But I would do Honda parts on brakes, man. It's very high quality. I've seen EBC brakes and other stuff on Honda rotors eat the rotor or squeal like no one's ever heard before. So Honda parts is just the way to go. You're welcome, man. You're welcome. I'm glad I was able to help you out, Canadian Restore. Intermittent die while driving, pull in clutch, will restart when driving, no carb issue, happens cold and hot. Kill switch somewhere? Yeah, kill switch or is all of the power cutting off and the motor? Are you losing everything? Your lights, your power to the motor, everything? Or is it just the motor shutting off? Okay, no. So it seems like it's just the lights. No, just the motor. Okay. So yeah, kill switch could be a problem. Loose battery terminals can be a problem. I know it's super simple, but loose battery terminals can be a problem. I would say kill switch. I would say kill switch or a loose connection at the ECU, which is unlikely. But I'm not knowing what bike you have. The ignition contact on the back of the ignition switch can sometimes go bad, and they are replaceable. Again, I don't know what bike you have, but that's kind of scary. So, starter relay on the NC700s, they had a starter relay problem. Kickstand kill 05 Royals. Start deluxe. Sorry, I didn't even get that. So about 2 more minutes. And then we'll max out at 35 minutes. Is there a place to order single jets instead of huge packages of them? Honestly, no, man. Same shape, I don't know, run them. There isn't, like, even when I order jets, I can't order single. They usually come in packs of 10. It's not lucrative for the company to send out that. So, no. If you want to increase the size of your jet, you can get small drill bits, like Hobbytown drill bits, tiny ones, and you can mic them up. I'm actually coming out with a carburetor cleaning page that I've been working on for a long time. There'll be products that people can purchase, but full carb teardowns and cleans on 4s, twins, singles, and I have a lot of detail in those that explains that further. Can you flash an ECU on a carb bike? I don't know why you would want to. The ECU is not, the ECU is getting a signal from the pulse generator, sending a spark to the coil. Re-flashing that, I don't see a point. I see more of a point for a fuel injected bike, but that's it. Well, someone asked something about a cone jet. I wish they'd stay up for a second longer. I also saw a question about the CL tires. Yeah, I'm gonna replace them with a more modern style street tire. I hated the way that they responded. The older vintage tire. The cornering was very scary on that thing. So a more modern sticky tire is what I'm gonna go with. I'll also be relacing the wheels as well to get some fresh spokes on there and stuff like that. So one more minute and we'll wrap it up. 35 people watching, that's awesome. I have a 05 Vulcan 800 and I want to do a bobber project. Any advice for me? You're in for a fun time. I hope you ride the bike until the season's over and then start it. Because I would honestly, my personal opinion on bobbers is if you can keep the bike to function and respond the way it did before the bob took place and make it look the style you want, you're doing a good job. A lot of people don't know how to do that properly, and they just start ripping stuff out. Oh, I don't need that. That's all I want is stripped down, which is cool. You can strip the bike down to turn signals and a horn and a headlight. That's cool. But as soon as you start doing stacks and velocity stacks and pods, then you're like on the forums asking people, hey, what jet size do I use, and all that kind of stuff. Try to make it function as modern and as well as it did before you did that stuff. And do a clean build. What pomade do I use? I use Suavecito. Favorite stuff. So that's a funny question. The cone filter rejet versus stock airbox. Dang it went away. All right, so the depending on what bike it is, oh man, so many questions right now. Depending on what bike it is, for the cone filter versus the stock airbox, you may be surprised at how little it actually does need. I've done a lot of pod filter jobs, and what I've found is that most of the time the idle jets need to only go up about a stage or two. So if you have a 35 idle jet, go to a 37, 38. Not much, really. I've done carb jobs where the idle jets were completely stock. The main jet is what you're going to go after, which will be, I would say, about 15 stages up. 15 to 20 even. On the old Honda 750s, the pod filter jobs, I go up 20 stages. So if it's a 110, I go to a 120. And so on and so forth. Or, I'm sorry, that was 10 stages up. If it's a 105, I go to a 115 or 120. Bigger main jets, because it's not restricted anymore. That pod filter is no longer restricting. It's now just whatever you give it is what the engine's going to take. So it needs the fuel to adapt to that, as well as shimming their main jet needle to help with that mid-range. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for everyone who showed up. This is a long video. I'm going to try to trim it down and not waste too much of you guys' time next time. But next Monday, again, live Q&A. It'll be episode 2. So you guys are a part of some history. If you want your question answered, go to the website motorcyclemd.com. There'll be an Ask MD, little drop down YouTube Q&A live question, and you can fill out that form. That is the most ideal way to ask me. On YouTube, I get tons of questions, and I would love to answer them. The best way is to just go to the website, hit me up with your email so you can subscribe and get the notifications when this comes out. Fill out that form. Tell me your mods. Tell me your bike. Tell me where you're asking from. I can get to know you guys. I hope this really brings more value to you. I think a lot of questions that I get asked will bring tons of value to a lot of different people. So again, thank you guys for your encouragement. and your questions. And that's what's going to drive this to continue. So don't think that your question is stupid. Every question is great, and I will look at all of them as being super valuable to anybody. Alright, I try to answer Honda specific questions. I am a Honda specialist, went to school for 2 years, and trained in the highest certification I could get for Honda at MMI in Orlando, Florida. And then now I've been working at a shop for about 7 years, so I use the information that I get from my amazing mentors who've been doing it since 1960s to add value for you guys. So Honda is my thing. A lot of stuff can be gravitated across all of the different models and makes. I'll try my best, but I'm going to try to cater to my Honda crowd the most. But I appreciate all the questions I get from any brand, so I'm not brand bashing at all. If you got 2 wheels, you're doing a great job. So this is Cody from Motorcycle MD. I'm going to go home and grab some dinner with my wife. You guys are awesome. Hope to see you guys next Monday. Probably 8. I'll send an email out, probably around 8:30, around the same time. Okay? Cody from Motorcycle MD on the first ever live Q&A Ask MD on YouTube Live. I'll see you guys next week. Later.